Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced that South Africa and 5 other African leaders will form part of a peacekeeping mission to Russia and Ukraine. The date for this mission has not yet been disclosed. Russia and Ukraine have been at war for over a year now. On the other hand, in August, Russian President Vladimir Putin is expected on our shores for the BRICS summit. But remember, the ICC has issued an arrest warrant for Putin, accusing him of war crimes in the conflict in Ukraine. As a signatory to the Rome Statute, South Africa is expected to arrest Putin if he arrives here. But the government says that won't happen. International relations expert Thembisa Fakude joins me now from Istanbul in Turkey to just dissect all of this for us. Thank you very much, Mr. Fakude, for your time here on eNCA. Just firstly, the latest news, of course, coming out of South African newspapers saying that our government has given President Vladimir Putin diplomatic immunity for August. Now, international relations responding, saying that this happens all the time and it doesn't necessarily mean that it trumps the warrant of arrest by the ICC.
Yeah, we heard about that, but the whole thing is just so clumsy, and it's own goal for Russia, because if I was in their position, I would have just kept quiet and stay away from this entire controversy. The fact that the entire world is talking about it, South Africa is talking about it, it's making right noises at right places, and this is exactly what those who issued this arrest warrant wanted. So it's a loss for Russia at the public opinion space, including South Africa. South Africa is looking, flip-flopping, and it's looking totally misplaced in terms of where it stands in this regard, given that it has to continually communicate, and most of the communication that we've had so far, it falls very short on trying to convince us. So it's its own goals all round, both from the Russians who are trying to protect their president, but importantly also from South Africans who are trying to convince us as the laymen on the street to accept and understand why Vladimir Putin must visit our country.
So you don't think that the fact that they've explained that they've issued proof to show that summits, for instance, world leaders have always received diplomatic immunity wherever they travel when there's a summit. So it doesn't matter that they're explaining that and providing proof.
It doesn't really matter. I think the fact that we're having this discussion, and unfortunately South Africa has not been successful in trying to convince us, in itself is a problem. We are having this discussion, months before the actual summit happens. And I think in terms of PR, this has not been good for both Russia and South Africa. And I think when the summit finally happens, it will be too late for both countries to actually convince the world and South African community that it was, whatever decision they take, it was the right decision, because this proliferation of the rhetoric that we had so far, unfortunately, is not doing any favors to both countries.
Now, the fact that South Africa has been criticized for not having a stance on this, the fact that we have decided to abstain during the voting of sanctions against Russia during UN meetings, etc. And now the president saying that we're going to send a team in terms of peacekeeping in both Russia and Ukraine. He hasn't really, communicated a date, etc. But does that make it, does that make us look better in terms of the stance that we might take?
Well, we're neutral, but at the same time, you're holding military drills on the same day that the Ukrainians were commemorating 1 year of the invasion of their country by Russia. And South Africa decides, for whatever reason, to have these drills coinciding with that anniversary. Again, the world saw that, and that report was widely spread throughout the world. And again, we ended up being on the wrong side on this story. That's the first point. The second point is, I'm not quite sure whether this mission that's going to be undertaken by the president will succeed. For starters, both leaders have said that they're not willing to engage in discussion. One, Volodymyr Zelensky, said that Russia must get out of its territory, and that's the condition for discussion. And Russia said, we're not going anywhere. So those conditions are still there, and both countries have dug in their heels, which means it's basically a non-starter. Number two is, I'm not quite sure why our president decided not to to draw the AU in this, instead of him being the leader and these 5 other countries, including Egypt, Uganda, Senegal, and Zambia. I'm not sure whether these countries will be able to achieve what other bigger nations with due respect, including Russia, including China, and Turkey has failed to do. So we'll have to wait and see. But having said that, President Cyril Ramaphosa is a respected president, is known as a deal maker, and who knows, he might just achieve the impossible.
I mean, we are unable to even make sure that our peacekeeping missions work in our own continent, the SADC region, that is, with countries such as Mozambique, for example. But Mr. Fakude, if you had to advise Sidney Mufamadi, the international relations advisor to the president, about this particular topic, at some point we heard that they were telling President Vladimir Putin that he should actually just attend the BRICS summit, but virtually, stay in his country, attend it virtually. But that would make it look as though we don't want to take the responsibility of arresting him, right, in terms of him actually arriving here. What would you advise Sidney Mufamadi to advise the president with this entire saga?
Well, I'll repeat what President Ramaphosa said. Change the venue. If you want to have Vladimir Putin, and if he wants to insist on coming to attend physically the BRICS summit, take it elsewhere where he's not going to be arrested. To take it elsewhere where the country that has not ratified the Roman Statute, and that would be much more easy instead of us having this fiasco and back and forth discussion, which no one is winning. In fact, what we see happening is that South Africa is taking itself deeper and deeper into the quagmire, and it's going to be very difficult after this, by the way, for South Africa to convince the world that it's still the same South Africa that upheld, human rights and all other beautiful things that President Mandela and others espoused. So I'll advise Dr. Mufamadi to advise the president to shift the BRICS summit to another country where there are no complications.
Well, the other country, for instance, in the Rome Statute, Brazil is already on it. We are on the Rome Statute as well. Russia is seemingly not, but it would make it look bad if we suddenly move the venue to that particular country. It will look bad for all the BRICS countries, which would be a bad thing for the African continent. So which one would you say we should go to? Would it be India? Is it still not going to make us look bad in terms of, trying to evade or trying to run away from making this arrest? Especially with the news that... Sorry, I'm just thinking about South Africa, particularly with what we heard from Mr. Brigety. Apologies for that, Mr. Fakude. And how we look in the international world and our trade partners, such as the US, if we try to evade this arrest and try to make plans to make sure that he doesn't come here so that it's not our responsibility.
Well, the horse has bolted in that regard, but it would have saved South Africa a lot because, we've seen total fumbling in terms of articulation of South African position or answering relevant questions that have emanated from various quarters. So it would have saved us a lot if we have suggested earlier on to shift or move this to another country. I don't think it would have been a big deal in terms of us looking as if we're trying to avoid a certain situation, but this situation could just cost us a lot. The other side matters that are emerging as a result, including the story of Lady R, that ship that was docked outside someone's town, has caused a lot of problems, and much has been written about it. And unfortunately, we have not been able to, for lack of a better term, spin the narrative that has come out of that. We left it to others. There were very few commentary, at least internationally, from the government in terms of trying to make the world understand why the situation is the way it is right now. Instead, this story was covered by almost everyone, including the New York Times. Some of the most influential media institutions in the world wrote about this, but South Africa never responded. So we are in a situation now where the issue of Vladimir Putin is creating a havoc in our international relations, but importantly, it's also jeopardizing a lot of other potential economic boons that will be coming or should be coming to this country. We know, for example, that other people are now reporting that the renewal of AGOA, which is the Africa Growth Program that we have with the United States, might just not be renewed, meaning that South Africa might just find itself outside AGOA, that's going to be a dangerous
Catastrophe.
situation that if that does happen, which is Africa Growth Opportunity Act. So if that happens, we're in trouble. So the whole situation and the involvement of Vladimir Putin in the past couple of months and days leading to the BRICS summit has actually created and cost us a lot in terms of our foreign policy positioning.
And I wonder, looking at the Western world, I wonder which of these 5 countries would agree, or the other 4, if it's not us, would agree to host, just so that Vladimir Putin can attend the BRICS summit. It's going to be quite an interesting few weeks until August. Thank you very much for speaking to us. That is international relations expert Thembisa Fakude.